Hot take. All environmentalists should be anti-war. Not only for humanitarian reasons, because people lose their lives, and human justice is climate justice, but also because of the insane emissions that war and the military-industrial complex creates. Maybe you didn't know war was bad for the planet, so let's dive into it today. Hello everyone, it's Emma, and welcome back to my channel where we talk about all sorts of things zero waste, focusing on free, easy, and fun ways to live low waste, and of course we do have to talk about serious topics like this, because this stuff matters. Before we get into it, some of you are probably like, why are you qualified to talk about this? I'm an Air Force veteran, so I'm very qualified. And I'm an environmentalist. I don't really like to talk about that I was in the Air Force because like it really is a conflict of my morals, and I was leading two different lives while I was in. I was like in costume and uniform, and then I was me, as you see here. And so you can hear my full thoughts on what it was like to be an environmentalist while in the military, and those go against your morals in this video up here. Especially because that's a job you cannot quit. You're on a contract, and if you quit, you go to prison, so I had to stick out my contract. That message particularly goes out to everybody who's like, why would you join the Air Force if you're an environmentalist? I joined as an 18-year-old who had no other option in life. I did, but I didn't want to go into debt. And in this country, that's the only way that you can get free school and healthcare, which is really sad, so that's what I did, and then I later became an environmentalist halfway through my 6-year contract, and I had to stick it out. Something else to note, as I hinted at in the intro, is that war is not just the act of dropping bombs, it's also the entire war machine. It's training troops, it's sending troops overseas, it's restationing troops even stateside, it's moving goods and supplies, it's creating those goods and supplies, it's creating aircraft, it's weapons testing, it's so much more. And yes, in this video I will be heavily focusing on the US military because that is what I am most familiar with, as well as that is what I'm able to find the most information on because that is the most pollutive military in the world. But all militaries are polluted, whether they are actively engaging in war or not. All militaries contribute massively to climate change and the loss of human lives, directly or indirectly. And one last thing, these numbers are likely going to be way below what they actually are. The reported numbers, what it's reported to the public, generally aren't going to be that accurate. As well as it's hard to find a true carbon footprint of the military because of what really goes on behind the scenes. And I talk about that more in my original video about what it was like to be in the military as an environmentalist, because the military industrial complex goes deep. You would be shocked at what brands, I'll name a few. Ball, like the mason jar brand, weapons manufacturing. Singer, the sewing machine brand, weapons manufacturing. Disney, I learned this from my friend who's in the Navy. Disney creates war vessels for training. The vessels that they train on in the Navy boot camp, Disney makes them. Shocking. Military industrial complex runs deep, so it's hard to find a true carbon footprint and waste footprint of the military. Let's get into it. It's going to be a heavy topic, but it is going to be very important. So thank you in advance for watching this, and I am fundraising as well down below in general for all of Gaza, but I also have two families linked down below their GoFundMes if you have the funds to support. If not, your views, your likes, your comments help support this video and help get this message out to more people. First, emissions. This is probably what most people associate the military with, at least I do. So, according to The Atlantic, the Department of Defense, or DoD from here on out, reported their own emissions being at 51 million metric tons in 2021. That's the same as the entire country of Sweden. And that's just our military, not our whole country. The whole country of Sweden. I know they're a smaller country, but our entire military. And again, that's just self-reported too. Now, what causes the emissions? So much, of course, flying jets for training, transporting troops, transporting supplies and goods and creating those goods, and even the dropping of bomb releases emissions. The emissions of the military truly run deep. And as I said, I'm sure not enough people actually think about how the actual dropping of bombs creates emissions, and I don't just mean flying the planes. The actual bomb itself releases emissions. Plus, of course, it takes a huge amount of resources to create just one of these weapons. And the dropping of bombs is not just detrimental to the people whose lives are going to be lost and impacted forever, but it also harms the environment as well. The water, the soil, the air, the trees, the animals. And since emissions know no borders, if a bomb is dropped, say, I'll just use a real life example, it's dropped in Gaza, the emissions are flowing via the wind to other countries to the east. So all of those other countries who are not part of this war, this genocide, are being affected by these emissions as well, and these pollutants and these carcinogens. So if you're curious how much bombing actually does create emissions, let's again use the genocide of Palestinians as an example. So according to TRT World, just in the first 2 months of Israel's bombing, they have dropped 10,000 bombs, which resulted in 6,689 tons of emissions. Just 2 months, just from one country. But this genocide has been going on for 9 months plus by the time you're seeing this, which would equate to 30,100 metric tons of emissions just from bombs, just from Israel. And you can look at this list right here. This is just a snippet of the list. This list goes on and on. You can find the list and all of my other sources in the blog post to see how many countries that surpasses. Again, one country, just bombs, just 9 months. And this is especially why it makes me so angry when governments and corporations tell us to reduce our carbon footprint, to use a reusable water bottle, to bike more, to eat less meat. Yes, that stuff matters, and I'm not gonna downplay that either. Our small actions do matter. But when governments, especially, and corporations tell us to reduce our emissions, but this is happening, makes me so angry. I calculated my personal carbon footprint just for fun, and mine is around 5 metric tons, which is like less than the US average, but like a little bit higher than the world average. So it's still a lot. But again, how dare they pressure me when countries like Israel are producing 6,000 times more emissions just from bombs? Forget transportation, forget flying, forget everything else. If this statistic alone isn't enough to make you anti-war as an environmentalist, let's keep going. Let's talk about the destruction of biodiversity. So bombs, they not only create emissions and harm people and kill people, it also destroys biodiversity. And it makes a lot of sense, right? When you drop a bomb on a city, it's not just destroying a building and lives, but also forests, farms, riverbeds, meadows, and more. It destroys animal habitats, kills plants, kills animals, and leaves animals defenseless as well. Defenseless against humans and other predators. It can destroy an animal's food source too. And this goes further than just war zones. And this might surprise you if you don't know much about the military, the US military, but I'm sure other militaries do this as well. Missiles, bombs, other military equipment has to be tested first before it goes to war. And where is it tested? Often in remote areas that might not have a lot of people, but are very sensitive when it comes to the environment. There might not be a lot of people in these areas, but there are still people in these areas, particularly indigenous peoples in these areas, such as White Sands, New Mexico, and the Marshall Islands. But regardless, there's still animals and plants here too. When living in Las Vegas, the military wanted to buy part of the Desert National Wildlife Refuge, the largest national wildlife refuge outside of Alaska. They wanted to buy this for missile testing, but there are several important species here. Of course, they're all important in the overall food chain, but like scientifically, you know what I mean, they're like a keystone species. That is the desert bighorn, as well as Joshua trees. So the military buying this land to use for bombs and other missile and weapons testing would put all these important species at an even higher risk than they already are, being located in this already gigantic missile testing range. This is just one example, right? Just one example of how the US military tests their weapons. I also made a video a while ago about the Marshall Islands that you can check it out up here. Again, it's a little bit old, but it is very eye-opening to see how the US goes into other countries, displaces indigenous people, impacts them in their health by using nuclear weapons and other weapons, destroying their homes all over the US and all over the world. Another example would be the dropping of the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Those are the first ever dropped. So like they did test them in the United States, but those are the first ever like applicable, like real life nuclear bombs dropped, which changed the course of history for forever. You should also be anti-nukes if you're an environmentalist, but like still to this day, the Japanese people are facing those effects. That was only 70 years ago. People are still alive who witnessed that. Yes, the US tests outside of the US, but the US tests inside US borders as well. They're affecting their own people. In Alamogordo, when testing for said nuclear weapons, the people of this area became the first people to face nuclear fallout and face the consequences for their entire lives in the form of adverse health effects. So if you don't care about war for the impact on human lives, care for it for the impact on the environment, the plants, and the animals. Human lives are part of biodiversity, so the loss of human lives is unacceptable, like on a moral level, but also for the environment. We are part of the environment, whether you believe that or not, we are. We belong to the environmental web. Especially because a lot of people that are affected by war are people of color and indigenous people who are protecting these vital environments. I'm not saying that the loss of Americans or the loss of white people would not be bad. What I'm saying is like, again, the genocide in Palestine, they know how to take care of that land. They know how to live with those plants and those animals. As, you know, we saw similar things with the genocide of indigenous people in the United States. They know how to properly take care of the land and steward those lands. So when we erase them, we are erasing their knowledge and their wisdom about the environment and how to be good stewards of the land. Moving on to pollution, as you can see, all of this is tied together. All of these relate to one another. So the dropping of bombs, again, not only destroys biodiversity, but it releases a ton of pollution. It releases this instantly in the blast and also for years and decades, potentially centuries to come. Again, bringing it back to the Marshall Islands, all of the nuclear testing there, they put all this nuclear waste into a dome. This was during World War II or shortly after World War II. I think it was during the Cold War, so like the 50s. So we're talking 70 years ago again. They put this cap over this nuclear waste, but because of climate change, because of rising ocean levels, it is becoming eroded and it is cracking, and this nuclear waste could potentially leach out into these small indigenous communities in the Marshall Islands 70 years later. So these bombs, these weapon testings are not only affecting people right now, it will affect people for decades and generations to come. And not only do bombs pollute, but vessels do too. Aircraft dump fuel. I remember the first time I learned that, I was like actively at work in the Air Force and they said something like, oh, the plane's dumping fuel, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, they're doing what? They dump fuel. It evaporates before it hits the ground, so you know, somebody's not gonna get drenched in jet fuel, but it still goes into the environment in the form of pollutants. Any vessel on the ocean or a lake, it's illegal to dump waste. Illegal. Except for the US Navy. The US Navy can dump whatever they want into any body of water they want. Most vessels are only allowed to dump stuff like metal, wood, you know, stuff that's kind of natural. I still don't necessarily agree with it, but this includes plastic. The Navy is fully allowed to dump plastic into the ocean. And so pollution, again, it runs deep. It's more than just the emissions of flying a jet. It's the emissions to create all of this stuff. It's extracting all the resources to create all of this stuff. Stuff being weapons, aircraft, food, goods, clothing, and it's also what the military does with this stuff. The military also isn't really great about recycling. Okay, yeah, we're gonna talk about that next. So let's just move on to wasting resources. Again, I talked about that a lot in my original video about my experience in the military, because this one makes me especially mad as someone who's very passionate about recycling, but so many resources are wasted in the military. And it's kind of all connected. So every unit gets a budget, as every government entity does, at the fiscal year. So October 1st, you get a budget. You have till September 30th to use it the next year. But the unit has to spend all of that money, or else the next year their budget's going to get cut. And what if they need that full budget next year and they didn't need it this year? Now you don't have enough money. So every unit is incentivized for that reason to use 100% of that money, whether they need to use it or not. This means quite often that things are purchased that are unnecessary. I've been part of units that needed to just buy stuff in September, so they bought stuff like new chairs, even though every single chair in the building was perfectly functional. You know, same with desks, lanyards, a new fridge, whatever it may be, even though the old stuff was working just fine. And the old ones, they're thrown away because the military is not known for their recycling. Not only recycling of common items like plastic, metal, paper, but also things like tech, furniture, reselling stuff. Non-existent. And I get it to an extent. Like, the military doesn't want to resell a government computer because what if something is on there and somebody gets it, you know, gets into the wrong hands. But can't the military create their own tech recycling program? I don't see why that's not possible. Especially, you know, forget the environment. Clearly the military doesn't care about the environment, as I've talked about for the last 10 minutes. But you know what the military does love? Saving money. You would think that they would want to start this recycling program to save themselves money. Now, in countries where the military is located, where recycling is mandated, Japan, for example, while I was stationed in Japan, recycling there, mandated. So we did recycle there. But when I went to Las Vegas, in my new unit in Vegas, it's not mandatory to recycle in the US or in the state of Nevada, so my unit didn't recycle. There was a small recycling center on base, so I took the initiative to start a recycling program. Learn more about how I did that up here. So it is possible for individual units to recycle, but is, you know, Nellis Air Force Base mandated to recycle? Nope. Is the entire Air Force mandated to recycle? Nope. So that sucks. Now, something that the military does do, I will give them one small shout out in this video. The military does recycle aircraft parts, so that's exciting, via the Boneyard. It is in Arizona? I think it's in Arizona. They're essentially retired aircraft. They fly them all here. Their last flight goes to the Boneyard. And then from there, they're picked apart. You know, somebody needs a new tire. Great, got it. Somebody needs a new battery. Great, got it from here. But I guess bringing it back to money, yeah, the military loves to save money and cut corners. But when the DoD budget is nearly $1 trillion, there's really no incentive to recycle or reduce resources when you have endless money. Once again, this is just the surface. This is literally what you can easily find on the internet. I'm sure maybe some scholars have gone out there and done some more digging into this, but if you want me to dig into this topic more, I definitely will. Ask your questions below and I'll answer them. But what I'm getting at is we never truly know the wastefulness of the military, just again because how deep the military industrial complex runs. How many companies that you think just create everyday products are involved in weapons manufacturing. Everything too from, you know, supplying contractors to growing food to creating food and shipping it and operating these military stores. But also, again, given this is just a surface area, very surface view of how wasteful the military is shows you just how wasteful not only the US military is, but how wasteful war is. We don't even need to go deep for me to show you that. It is extremely destructive to people, a gigantic cost of taxpayer dollars, and clearly has a massive impact on the planet. Not just a direct impact either through destruction of land and species, but a huge impacts that we will be feeling for years and decades to come in the form of pollution and global warming. I've said it once and I'll say it again. All environmentalists should be anti-war. And if you don't consider yourself an environmentalist, think again. You don't have to be a scientist. You don't have to be a content creator or whatever you think an environmentalist is in your head. Only requirement to be an environmentalist is that you care about the planet. That's it. So let's protect our planet, all the species on it. Let's protect one another. And again, if you're still here, I am fundraising for Gaza in general with the fundraiser on this video, but also two specific families that have lost everything in this genocide. They have lost their homes, they have lost family members, they have lost their clothing, their food, their culture, their libraries, their universities. They've lost everything because of war, because of genocide. If you can donate monetarily, please, I consider you to donate just $5. You don't have to donate your whole life savings, just a little bit of change. You know, skip one of your coffees this week and donate to these families instead. But if you can't donate, please share their links with others. Please engage with this video to get their message out. I'm also continuously advocating for them on TikTok and Instagram, so when you see me post that short form video, click the repost button, share it with somebody. If you're on TikTok, there are endless ways to help for free, such as using different sounds, different audios, different filters, following Palestinian people, liking their content, engaging with their content, because a lot of them have monetized content. So if you watch their video, people, they're getting money. Other ways that you can help, of course, sign petitions when you see them, call and write your local politicians, vote. Vote for people who care about ending war and ending specifically this genocide. Speaking of coffee, getting your local, getting your weekly coffee, boycott brands that are supporting this genocide. Starbucks, McDonald's, Disney, just to name a few. If you want to check out the full BDS, boycott, divest, sanction, you can check out the full list down below of what Palestinian activists are asking us to boycott. Thank you for watching this video. Again, it's a really heavy topic, but very, very important, so I really appreciate your time, especially if you made it all the way to the end, and if you engaged in this video, and if you donated to these families. Thank you so much. This really just proves that our small actions matter, right? No government is stepping up to save these people, but all of us pitching in $5 here and there will get these families to safety, will help them rebuild their lives, and helps give them at least a little bit of hope. I hope that this video was educational, inspirational, at least shed some light on some things that maybe you didn't know about. And if you found it helpful, please share it with others. Please spread this word. Not for me. Do it for these families. Do it to end war. And if you're a veteran like me, quick plug, and you want to find an organization that will, you feel similar to me. Maybe you're a veteran, but you don't really agree with most veterans. You agree with peace and ending nuclear weapons, etc., etc. Join Veterans for Peace. I really want to find a local chapter. I'm much too far from any of them right now, but maybe when we move to California, I can find a local chapter and actually get involved in person. I love that they have in-person rallies. You can go set up a booth and educate people yourself. You can join community calls, Zoom calls with them to learn more. Thank you again for watching. I really appreciate your time. I will see you in the next video, but until then, remember that your small actions make a big difference in the long run. Bye, guys. I'm really hoping that this doesn't get demonetized. I'm also continuously advocating for them. Advocating? I think I said that. Oh my gosh, I keep losing it. What was I gonna say? Were you sent by someone who wanted me dead? What did I wanna say? I got it.